Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Well, it's early in the morning and we're just waiting for our shearer to show up because it's shearing time here today. We've got all the sheep up in the yards, a little bit for them to eat just behind them. Hopefully they don't get too hungry in here. And our shearer will be here any minute now to make a start.
Shearing is always a busy day for us. There's an awful lot to do, including getting the sheep in and getting them back out to the paddock at the end of the day. This morning I'm on my own for a little bit, but my brother will be up here soon to give me a hand to help out. It's always nice to have a little bit of help. It's easy for one roustabout to keep up with one shearer. I can keep up with two shearers fairly easily as long as nothing goes wrong and I don't have to stop and do other jobs like pen up or press. But it's still always nice to have a bit of extra help. This sheep is also getting a red dot mark on its head. This is a spray can of spray marker, and this is because it is a wether or a desexed male sheep. We are marking them so we can draft them out afterwards and keep them separate because some of them will be going to the butcher soon. I thought today, while we were in the shearing shed, that we would look a little bit more closely at what the wool classer's role in the shed is. The wool classer is actually the boss of the shed, and everybody needs to do what the wool classer says. This actually includes the farmer as well. If the farmer won't listen to the wool classer, they can often all the shearers and shed staff can walk out. But the wool classer, along with looking after the wool, has a number of other jobs they need to do in the shed, along with being boss. But the most important role is to make sure that the wool comes off cleanly and is skirted correctly and classed correctly to get the grower as much money as possible for each fleece. Depending on how many shearers are working in the shed, there will be a number of roustabouts that are working in the shed as well with the wool classer. Normally it is a roustabout's job to pick up the fleece and throw it onto the table, and then another roustabout will come and sweep up the floor. The wool classer stays at the table and works with the roustabouts to skirt the fleece. So this means just going around the outside of the fleece and taking off all the sweaty patches under the armpits and the dirty patches around the edges, and making sure there's no stain or dags around the butt. As the fleece gets skirted, the roustabout and the classer throw the edges of the fleece in towards the centre, and then the fleece can be rolled up into a ball with the underside facing up. This allows the classer to get a really good look at the fleece and to assess the quality of the wool. Normally we'll pull a staple out and have a closer look at that and check that for strength, and length and things like that. And then this fleece, because it was a good fleece, went straight in the press. Here's a closer look of me finishing skirting the fleece, rolling it up into a ball so that I can have a good look at the underneath of it. I'll pull a couple of staples out and see if I can break them. This fleece is just a little bit weak. Now I'm pulling out a staple to see if it's long enough. Make sure it's longer than my 4 fingers. Because this one is weak, it's a cast fleece, so it goes into the tender bale. At this point, my brother turns up to give me a hand too. Big thanks to my brother and to Arnie, our shearer, for coming to help out today. Without these two, I couldn't get everything I need to done for shearing in one day.
Sorry, I was thinking about how to pick them up. Oh, yeah. And I can't remember, but there's a bit where you've got to put the... So I've got 3 fleeces sitting here on the table, and I thought we would just have a look closely at each one of them and why it's going in the class that it is going in. I'll put the camera on the tripod so I've got both hands to show you this, and we'll have a good look at these 3 fleeces. So this fleece here is a good fleece. It's a nice bright white colour without any yellowing in it. It's a reasonable size. It's not as big as I would like, but it's still a reasonable size. Now if we pull a staple out, it's got good enough length. Everything this year is a bit short, but I always just measure the wool up against my hand. That's a really good way just to quickly and easily measure each staple. Now if we come up here nice and close, you can see, I hope you can see, there's a really nice fine even crimp up and down the whole length of the staple without any variation in it. So that's what we're looking for. Some other fleeces you'll see either a variation along the staple, or particularly towards the breech end of the sheep, the wool tends to get a bit coarser. The other thing that we want to do is just check that it's sound, so it's not going to break. That is plenty strong enough. That is a nice fleece. If we come round to this next one here, without knocking the tripod over, this is the worst fleece we had this year. This is a horrible fleece. You can see a bit of yellow in it. Now probably if I got a bar of soap and some water, most of that would wash out. Now they teach you when you're classing that if it's scourable colour, so if it will wash out with soap and water, then it's okay to put in your main fleece line, and it's only really heavy colour that you've got to pull out. However, I have always found that when you're taking it down to the wool stores, if you've got anything in there, even if you have tested it and washed it out, they'll take one look at that and say that's got colour in it, and they will downgrade you. So I always pull out any coloured fleece. Now if we pull out a staple, that one's longer than I thought. Some of the others I pulled out were quite short. But if we have a look at it, it's just not a very nice fleece. The crimps in it are a much coarser crimp than the other fleece we had. Now this is still okay. It's not too bad, this one. It's just not, it's not as nice as the good one. So we're going to pull this one out, and we're going to downgrade it for the colour and the fact that it's just not very nice style. Now if we come round to this last fleece here, this one is quite short, so 1 finger shorter basically. Often these ones are a bit more tender. What the problem with this one is, particularly if we look down here, it's quite felted up. Now this isn't bad still, I can pull this apart. I've seen fleeces that you can grab and you cannot pull them apart. You can stand on them and pull with both hands, they will not come apart. But this one's just a little bit matted, it's not as free as the good one. And often when they get matted like this, they will break. So that one is quite weak on the staple, so that is tender and cotted or matted. They get like this for a number of reasons. Because of our lice problem this year, the sheep have been rubbing a little bit, and that really helps to mat them up. But this still isn't too bad, but we'll pull it out because of the cotted nature of it. Also, if we look at this, you can see there's a finer crimp up here compared to down here. There's not a lot of difference in this one, but some of them do have a major difference in them. Okay, if we just come back to this first fleece again round here, this is the staple I've just pulled out of here. This is one of our broader fleeces here. So if we compare the two of these, you can see nice fine crimps here and much coarser crimps here. Now the crimp generally relates to how fine the wool is. The coarser the crimp in here, the coarser the wool fibres. The finer the crimp down here, the finer the wool fibres. So I'm not even going to have a guess at what these are, because it's been that long since I've had any good data to compare them with. This one's possibly about 22, this one's possibly about 19 micron, but I've never been great at guessing this, and it is just a guess. The variation in each staple is generally greater than variation between the fleeces that you are trying to pull out. So this staple will have some very coarse fibres in it, this one will have some very fine fibres in it. So when people are breeding sheep, some of them get all of their wool tested and will cull sheep to give the not only the micron they want, but the variation, to try and reduce variation and try and reduce prickle factor. Now the prickle factor in the wool is any fibre, I think it's over 35 or 36 microns in diameter, and this will have fibre in it that thick, but this is quite nice and soft other than the grass seeds, so it doesn't have too much in it like that. So at the end of shearing, along with our main fleece line, which we put straight in the press and bale up, we've got, I don't know, there's about 4 or 5 fleeces here that are broader. So these have coarser fibres in them and a much coarser crimp. And that is used to be denoted by 3B. Now they seem to put it down as 3AM within the classes note, a broader line. Here we have shorter wool. So these are, oops, that one's only a little bit shorter, but these are the ones I've pulled out because they're too short to go in the main line. There's not a lot of difference in it this year, it's all fairly similar, but I did pull out these shorter ones, and these are the tender ones, so they will break a bit more easily. Because of the rough summer we had last year, if they're going to break, most of them, it's right up here on the tip where they weren't quite getting enough feed and it was hot as anything, and that just makes the wool a little bit weaker. Even so, these ones, they're not very tender, and there weren't nearly as many of them as I thought there was going to be this year. So all in all, I didn't have to pull out too many fleeces this year and as cast fleeces, and that was really nice. Every single piece of wool that comes off the sheep is worth money. So at the end of shearing, it's the wool classer's job to make sure that everything is cleaned out. All the wool bins are cleaned out and there's no wool left anywhere in the shed. This also includes all the fleeces that the farmer from sheep that the farmer has shorn over the last 12 months, and probably some of the crutching wool that the farmer has just chucked in one corner of the shed. A good wool classer will go and clean out everything in the shed and make sure it is all baled up, ready to go. The classer also has a fair amount of paperwork to do during and after shearing. So every time the shearers finish a run, so every 2 hours, so there's 4 runs throughout the day, the classer's job, it's part of the classer's job to go and record their tallies in the wool book. So usually we've got a book like this, date up the top. We've only got one shearer, so there's only one stand or one pen running. Shearer's name, and then for each of the runs, how many he has done, and then add them all up at the end of the day. I don't bother with this because we only have one shearer. He keeps his tally going to the end of the day, and then we just pay him on that. Shearers are all paid on how many per sheep. So their daily total and their total at the end of shearing is quite important to keep track of, or you're going to have a riot on your hands if you're not paying the shearers properly. There is also a shed wool book, and either the classer or often the presser will fill this one out. So we don't do enough bales to make it worth me filling this one out either. But you've got, each bale is numbered, so you've got bale numbers here, and you've got a whole bundle of other information that you put in here, including the most important one, bale number and what's in it. This one's also, and if you've got scales on your press, you can also record the weight of each bale. This gives the farmer a bit of an idea about what he's got to sell when he takes his wool in. And there's some other columns there that you can fill in too, but bale number and what you've put in it are the two most important ones to put in this book. At the end of everything, the classer has the classer specification sheet to fill in, and this is for the farmer to take in when he sells his wool, and this gives the wool buyer a bit more of an idea of what's in each bale than just what's on the top of the bales. So we've got farm brand in here, classes registration number. So all classes need to be registered. They need to have done a wool classes course. How many bales there are in this year's lot. A little bit more information about the classer. And then we start going into what we've actually got in the wool. So we've got mob number. If you've got a really big property, you're probably going to have lots of different mobs that you are shearing. Each mob potentially has a different sort of wool because it's been run in different conditions and they may be different types of sheep. But wethers will produce different wool to dry ewes and ewes that have had a lamb. They all have different characteristics. Number of bales from each mob, the description on the wool, individual bale numbers, and then there's a little bit for brief remarks here. So you might have a mob of wethers to start with a description of 3 AM, that is your top grade of wool, and it might be 120 mils long. Your next mob might be a mob of ewes that have had a lamb. It might also have a bale description of 3 AM as their top wool that came off it, but in your brief comments you might put down that it is slightly tender and only 90 mils long. These are both 3 AM, but the wool has very different characteristics to it, and this is how the classer lets the buyer know how many bales in each lot have each characteristic. So the wool classer is a really important part of any shearing team. Obviously you need shearers. If you've only got a very small shed with only 1 or 2 shearers, sometimes the team will just consist of the 2 shearers and the classer. Often there'll be a rouseabout as well to help pen up and all of that sort of stuff. So I hope this video has been useful and gives you an idea of all of the things that the wool classer needs to keep on top of during shearing. It's great to have shearing out the way for another year. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!